All right, we should be live now. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us today. Today we have Veronica, Zhai, and Kelly Carter from Fivetran joining me for our this episode of the Inner Join. We're gonna talk about BI dashboard sprawls and how to do data product management in companies. This is a topic that I would say is starting to pick up a lot in some LinkedIn chatters, as well as more customers that come across wanting to do a better product management for their data and BI. So I'm really excited to have both Veronica and Kelly here, who has a lot of experience in this regard and have been really pushing a really high standard of execution on data product management at Fivetran. So with that, thanks for joining me, Veronica and Kelly. Uh, let's start with a quick round of intro. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into data and managing data products.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Zhai. I'm Director of Data Product and Operation at Fivetran. Very excited to be here and talk about all things data and product management. I became a data product manager by accident because I realized I was more motivated by creating and building instead of operating. I actually started my career as an option trader at JP Morgan. And while I was working in a three-person team that was making 50 to 100 million revenue a year, which is quite a bit of a revenue, I was really stunned about the fact that we were not monetizing the client data that we have to make even more money. At the time where all the tech evaluation went over the roof and a lot of technology companies was making money by selling data or selling ads. From there, I was able to persuade a few software engineers to build a client intelligence database and analytics products with me in their free time. And that product went viral, and all the traders globally was adopting the products. And that's how I discovered that I'm actually much better at building data products than just operating a trading book. So from there, I became the first data product manager that built the enterprise data stack for JP Morgan's markets business. From there, I built two more data product that went viral, and two of them were both demoed to our CEO, JB Diamond, because of the innovation that we brought to the business. Um, but that's when I decided that this is an area that I'm truly passionate about, I'm really good at, and I decided to double down on the data PM career and pivot from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Right now, I run the data at Fivetran. I actually became an early employee of the data team and joined Fivetran at the fastest scaling period. And I helped grow the team from 7 to now a team of 40. So over the last few years, my role has shifted from being a data product manager to be building data teams. And to me, data PM is really about understanding how the system works and understanding the revenue lever and the bottleneck of the company, and then solving around that.
That's awesome. Actually, I was gonna comment that in a way, for a lot of data products to be successful, the partnership with domain stakeholders are critical. And the fact that you had that interest to learn data and build products and combine that domain knowledge that you had as an option trader prior, I'm sure made that your data product much more effective than anything that just like the technical team might just come up with on their own. So that I think that's a really amazing story. How about you, Kelly? You've been
Yeah.
managing all data products at Fivetran for some time now, so I would love to hear your story as well.
Yeah, I actually wound up in the data field altogether on accident. It wasn't my initial career plan. So prior to Fivetran, when I was right out of college, I actually worked in finance for about 10 years. And during that time, I primarily worked with financial sales, doing the rev ops side of business. So that was really where my career was and where I thought my career was going to stay. And then, COVID happened. People are being introspective, thinking about, now that all we're in our house, we don't have our like outside ventures, our jobs, and the relationships are really all we have happening. That and everyone was making bread and getting sick of banana bread and such during COVID. Is this really what I want to do long term? And I started to realize the parts of my job, it were really the only parts that I enjoyed anymore were really when I got to work with our data team that was internal and build a lot of the reporting and do a lot of the dashboarding. And from there, that kind of sparked an interest to go back to school. So I went and I finished and got my master's in data science. And from there, I wound up at Fivetran. So whenever I came on, I was really brought on to bring a unique perspective because I hadn't really done data management before, but I'd been one of those stakeholders on the other side asking for a lot of dashboards, not, just going through the motions, getting a lot of information, not necessarily always doing the right things with it. So I knew the pitfalls of what happened when you weren't focused on what you were requesting and weren't thinking about the why behind your dashboards, just giving requests. Because sorry to my old data stakeholders, I was that person. And so now here, when we're at Fivetran, I work a lot specifically with our go-to-market teams, just because that's my bread and butter. That's where my expertise has been in my career so far. And a lot of what I have noticed has been, when it comes to I'm glad you already brought up the stakeholder component of this, both of you, because so much of ensuring that we have the appropriate suite of reports and we're getting to the core issues and roots of problems that people need is about having those in-depth conversations to get past the what you want and like the why you want it, right? Like what problem are you trying to solve? And that's always difficult when you're not necessarily working with technical stakeholders and they don't understand the impact that data can have. So I've kind of come into this from a managing data product from a very different point of view because I've been the person on the other side who for most of my career was asking for the dashboards to be built, not thinking about the implications of having bad data and the implications of dashboard sprawl. So now I have to, a lot of this has been honestly unlearning my own bad habits and thinking about, okay, if I can change my mindset and get forward to a place where we have solid data stack, solid data product, and the right dashboards, then I can change the minds of the stakeholders that I work with. And so that's really like the perspective I come in and try to bring with this topic specifically.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm sure that just makes you a lot more effective data product manager. I love hearing that story. And also something that I do see as a particularly unique to data industry. And when I say data industry, I'm talking about, data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, analytics engineers, BI analysts, that the range can go pretty far. You actually end up meeting a lot of people that came from different backgrounds, but then now sticking with data, and they are super effective in their positions, even though necessarily not everybody had like the traditional computer science background, because they know so much about the what the business needs are, or they have a particular advantage on being able to actually organize and manage and prioritize what's important versus not in the data world, which is so important. So it's great to hear your story, how you got here. So with that, I want to hear how you both define what is a data product and what is the product management or side of data product management is to you.
Mm-hmm. That is a great question to anchor this conversation. And I think in our context today, we're really talking about managing data and building data products that are used within an organization instead of being customer facing. Quite often, a lot of data teams end up doing both. For example, at Fivetran, we actually do both. But for today's context, we're really talking about how can you build data products that help enhance insights and enhance your operational capabilities. And this is something I like to tell my team, that being a data product manager or being a data person in an organization is not about how many dashboards you build or how busy you are. It is really about understanding how the business work and understanding the revenue drivers and limitations of the company, and then build a product around that. To me, that really is the highest purpose of a data product manager or any data person in the organization. I can give everybody a more academic overview of the activities of what that job entail, but I will have Kelly go first before we dive deeper.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that we try to focus on when it comes to data systems and products is a couple things. One, we want to ensure a good user experience. And oftentimes that isn't necessarily just doing what your stakeholders want, right? It's making them eat their vegetables, and doing the things you don't necessarily want to do. And a lot of the job of the data team, and like even down to your data analyst, right, is ensuring that we are thinking about the impact something is going to have, right? If it's going to be a minimal impact for one person and you're not really thinking about the core business questions that it's answering, is it really worth anyone's time putting effort into that? So that's the lens that we try to come through here at Fivetran, is what is the true impact of what we're building going to be? And two, how is it different than what already exists? And I think both those questions are the two most important questions you can ask when it comes to keeping a clean data instance and ensuring that your reporting suite is consolidated and unique. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that internally, people have the right information. And that's difficult to do if you have too many dashboards that have too much disparate information that are often sometimes similar, but slightly different, right? So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself the question, how can I ensure that all of the users are using the same thing to answer the same question? And that, I think, is a good segue to get into the life cycle of data.
Yeah. And I mean, Kelly, you really touched upon a few important things. One is Fivetran is also at this stage where, for kind of a company with just over 1,000 people, we have a 40% data team, which is a lot for any company of our size. So the problems that we face is really about going from great to elite, right? We start to think about the nuance of what is the marginal benefit of bringing in more dashboard and bringing in more metrics and the standardization side of the things. And going back to the life cycle of data management, if you are an organization that's starting on the data journey, that you've just started for a few years, I do think there are a few key responsibilities that a data PM owns. The number one is discovery and collecting data. You have to understand what data that you have within the organization, whether it's the core customer data or the reference data, or the revenue data around that, and replicating that data and centralize that all in one place. For many traditional organizations, that can take a long time to do without using modern data tools that help us discover that data source or doing that data replication. And secondly, you need to do data cleaning, transforming that data and incorporating your business logic. Again, for a newer-ish data organization, a lot of that actually fall onto the data PM or the data analyst shoulder to do that transformation. And then Kelly talked about the building side of the things. You have to build dashboard and data products or data science products to support that decision making. And lastly, which Kelly also touched base upon, is the data governance side of the things. Whether it's about having the best data quality, having the right metrics to measure the business, and having everybody use the same standardized metrics, or having a space of taxonomy where everybody is speaking the same language, as well as ensuring people have the right access, and sensitive data are protected. All of these I consider responsibility of a data product manager.
Yep, totally. So yeah, I think as you defined it, the data product is a really like some set of like organized data sets that can be used for analysis, or it is a dashboard or a notebook or some type of form that other people can also easily consume. And I am wondering now, going deeper into the dashboard. Dashboard, I believe, is the most easiest data products that you can point to, that everybody has in the company. And the part that we are seeing in the market is that a lot of companies are struggling with so many dashboards, not sure which one is the right one to use. Data team, not sure whether they should be able to just delete that dashboard because they feel like it's outdated, but who knows if somebody's still using it or if it's actually correct. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on why these things happen, and what are the kind of like the state that this can be managed better.
Yeah, I think technology is such a double-edged sword. As somebody who has jump-started data stack at both traditional large Fortune 500 companies like JP Morgan, and also working at fast-growing startup like Fivetran, I've really seen kind of bifurcated kind of state of data. So for a lot of traditional enterprise that has like huge technology budget, they are on the other side of the modern data stack. So having access to data and having real-time access and being able to do data engineering quickly, data transformation, and having the right performance and speed to see data is still a problem for many large enterprises in the world. On the other hand, for the companies like Fivetran that created modern data stack and is kind of in the front and center of defining the future of data, we have the opposite problem, because we are enabled by technologies that, in a 40-person team, we don't even need to have a data engineering team per se, because we have 300 data engineers at Fivetran that are already building the product for us. So we have such easy access to cloud data warehouse, to data integration, to data transformation tools and dashboard toolings, that our problem is having too many dashboard that is confusing and overwhelming and have high management cost. For example, there is a lot of costs that come from having too many dashboard, because then there's the noise that you may have similar metrics that you don't know what the precise difference is. Or you have too many dashboard, you don't know which dashboard to go to. And then you also have the high maintenance cost, because if any dashboard goes wrong, your data team needs to fix it. I like to tell my team that you really need to think about the marginal value of bringing more stuff, because quite often the operational cost and the noise outweighs the value. It's almost like running massive mansion that it comes with the chefs, the maids, the nannies, and the butlers. Yes, you get all the benefit of having it being very comprehensive, but then just the cost of managing people, the attention that costs you on a day-to-day to manage all of these assets is also very high. And that's really the biggest problem that we encounter at Fivetran. And part of the reason why we brought on Kelly. We need somebody to fundamentally reshift the data experience and drastically simplify the amount of asset that we have at Fivetran.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a trade-off, or kind of like a difference between the type of company you're working at and how they manage their data internally. Like what you mentioned, a lot of traditional companies have this problem of nobody gets access. You need to go through, file a Jira ticket, fill out all this form, and then we'll give you this dashboard that you specifically asked for. Don't ask us to do more stuff, which creates so much bottleneck and slowness in the company. At the same time, for a lot of companies that are moving super fast, they have a data mart that everybody can access. But as you have the floodgate open, data teams usually feel like, oh shit, data's going out of control. People are creating their own metrics and calling it like if it's a real data, when it's not. They are not using it correctly. And I think this part actually is something that I'm starting to see more in even larger companies, because a lot of business people, a lot of domain stakeholders, they're so frustrated that they cannot use the data. They know that data exists somewhere, but they're not getting enough access. Or, this is why they hire their own data analysts and BI analysts, business analysts, to create their own reports in different departments. So I think this problem around managing data products and also dashboard sprawls in companies are starting to become a lot more important than before.
Yeah.
Kelly, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. No. So yeah, I think you guys have both hit on like a lot of great points. And I think when it comes to how your company wants to manage your data stack, I think the perspective you have to come in with is, where is my company in its growth trajectory? So, and what I mean by that is, sometimes at earlier stage startups, you don't have a large data team. Oftentimes in tech, we tend to hire more technical people who do have the ability to build dashboards themselves and go into a data mart and find what they need. And this is, I think, exactly what happened at Fivetran. So we have a lot of technical people who have access to the data, and things are happening so quickly. Ideas are shifting so fast. Initiatives are coming up all the time, especially where we are right now in the market. People are in fight or flight mode. They're doing whatever they can and finding whatever insights they can to give their business that edge, to make sure they're staying relevant in the market, and they're staying on top of what are often like really difficult revenue targets to make, right? Especially the last few years, things have been shifting so quickly and often not in people's favor. Everyone's trying to find that data kernel, right? Everyone's trying to find that one thing, that one thing that's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. And so I think what happens is suddenly you have all this, you've been doing all this work, you're putting stuff together. A lot of it's not useful. You forget to get rid of it. It's still there. Your analytics team may or may not still be responsible for it. But then also, hey, you have all of your developers with access to data too. They're building whatever they want. You're not thinking about folder structure. You're not thinking about how people store things. And then suddenly you have a huge stack. And half the time, the analytics team doesn't even know where certain dashboards came from. So that kind of gets into where I think Fivetran was when I first joined. So I've been at Fivetran about 2 years. When I first joined, we had around, I would say probably close to like 250 to maybe almost 300 dashboards that lived in a shared space. That's not including anything that were built in like private user folders that people could do whatever they want with.
So
And
there are more actually in the private
there's even
user
more
folders.
beyond this. This is just what was in
Sure.
a shared space.
Yeah.
This is in our main BI tool too, because we also have supplemental.
We have supplemental tools
Right, you have
as
multiple
well.
Multiple of them.
Yeah.
So I remember I joined, and like one of the first questions I had was, well, what designates what goes here in the shared layer, like in the shared space, and here between a user folder? And the answer was, there isn't one. So I was like, okay, well, that's a problem. Because what started happening was people would assume if something was in a shared space that analytics built it. And if there was a problem with it, it was analytics' job to fix it.
I think that's like is what Veronica mentioned by operational burden.
We're getting requests to fix dashboards that we've never seen before. And we're like, okay, well, I don't know the context. The person who built this, who put this here, may or may not still be at the company. I don't know why they did it this way. So now it's suddenly, okay, we're going to go back to the stakeholder and say, sorry, we didn't build this. I don't know how to fix it. You don't want to be in that situation. So we started thinking through, okay, how can we use our spaces appropriately? And suddenly it was, okay, if something's in a shared folder, in an analytics owned space, what is the expectations of our stakeholders? And are those expectations that we can currently meet? And it became, okay, if it's in a shared space, I think from a core perspective, most of the time, the biggest thing that comes from that is that if it breaks, the stakeholder expects your analytics team will fix it. So that's the biggest thing. So it's suddenly, okay, is everything in this space something we're capable of fixing, or we even created in the first place? And the answer was a resounding no. So it's, okay, let's fix this. Let's figure out how we can get to a space where that's the reality. And so we did a lot of discussion, almost philosophically, of what does it mean for something, and I'm going to use this terminology of public and private dashboard going forward, just for the sake of fewer words. What does it mean to be a public dashboard? Like, what is essentially the analytics contract to that, right? Like, what are we responsible for as a team for anything that's in the public space? And if we have that definition, it then becomes, okay, that's a lens we can use in order to determine what should and shouldn't be in there. And then it was, okay, so our definition of it, it's in the public space. It's something that we own, and we are the ones who will fix it if there's a problem. If there needs to be enhancements to it that a stakeholder asks for, we are going to be the ones to do it. So how can we keep it this way? And suddenly it was, okay, well, clearly there's way too many assets in the public space now. So in order for us to get to this ultimate ideal vision, we have to reduce the number that's there. So it's, how do we do that? There's a couple of things we did that are pretty simple concepts that I think truly will work at any company. One is just defining what is allowed to be in there. And our definition is very simple. It is something that is going to be used on a recurring basis by at least one team. So, and a team can be even a person of one if it's something that's important enough, and it's something that's, for instance, we have finance dashboards that are barely used, but that's something where the data is important enough to be accurate. that just because that one person is using for their reporting, it should be in a public space and it should be analytics verified, and we need to ensure that it's accurate, right? So once you have that lens of how you define public versus a private dashboard, it's an easy exercise to go back and forth and see, okay, what should be here and what shouldn't be here. That'll help you get rid of some of the low-hanging fruit. Your next layer is, okay, now that we've gotten rid of the stuff that's, people's one-off scratchbooks, things that are just like really old, things that are for programs or teams that no longer exist, how do we reduce that even more? So I think that exercise probably helped us cut about 50 dashboards. Easy, like just skim off the top, really easy stuff to get rid of. The next thing it kind of comes down to, and the way we think about it, is usage. So as I talked about earlier, there are some dashboards that we just naturally know are going to be used more than others because of just the teams that require them and the size of the stakeholder network that is impacted by the information that exists in that dashboard. So what we did was we created so this was my kind of goal for last fiscal year. So I was like, how do I want to define success and get to a good space? And I was thinking through the lens of, okay, maybe I should create an OKR KPI about reducing by X number of percent, like the number of dashboards. And then I quickly realized, I don't know if that's the right lens because I don't actually know what is the right number of dashboards. Like, I can't say this is the number we absolutely need to get down to because I don't understand the user landscape and what's being used and what isn't. So instead, we came at it from the lens of, let's create an OKR based on usage. And the usage OKR we use at Fivetran is pretty simple. It's simply the percentage of dashboards that have more than 3 non-analytics users view that dashboard per month. So that's the lens. 3.
I mean, this is very much, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is an arbitrary number. It is different for different organization depending on the size of the team. For us, that number makes sense for us, but it's really about managing their products based on popularity and usage, not based on what people think it should be.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, popularity is a very important concept in Select Star as well, and this is why we track popularity of every single table, columns, schema database, as well as dashboards, charts, and the fields that are being utilized within BI. So
yep. Yeah, exactly. So the number is arbitrary. We did a lot of research back and forth to see what our current Looker usage was, how many dashboards currently set beyond that, how many were below it. And from there, we kind of set up some rules, right? So if something is not meeting this OKR on a consistent basis, it gets reviewed for potential deprecation. So when we started doing this, I think of the number of dashboards that were in our public space, only about 65% were clearing that bar, which is pretty low. So we were like, okay, this is a good place to start. So that makes a good first step. Coming in from that lens, we did some simple things. Like, I created just some tracking reports that send me a scheduled alert whenever something new falls below that number. And so I'm not having to actively go and look at the stack, right? There are ways that you can just create scheduled views for yourself, send it to your Slack, and now I'm like, oh, okay, this dashboard, this is no longer meeting requirements. Let's go figure it out and figure out if it's still needed. So sometimes what happens with that is we have very clear losers, right? They're ones you're able to get rid of quickly. And so by identifying these not popular dashboards, we were able to get rid of several steadily every month per month. And by the end of the year, I think we were up to about 80% of dashboards surpassing this. For this year, we've decided, now that we have a more established process. We want to be more aggressive. And by the end of the year, we'd like it to get it up to 90%. So that kind of comes into, more complicated, right? Because once you get to a good place with your stack where you have things that are analytics owned and you have things that are being used, identifying the dashboards that should or shouldn't be there anymore becomes more difficult. And that's the next phase that we are currently working through right now.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Even the other day, I got a Slack from you, Kelly, saying this quarter I'm deprecating 13 more dashboard, and I have another 15 dashboard that we need to deprecate and consolidate. So at this point, you have the entire process automated, done. It's a quarterly muscle that we flex that keeps our space clean.
Yeah. And switching gears a little bit, the other thing that we also did to kind of do a lot is, I think one thing that we often forget sometimes in business is we'll do a ton of work to push forward a cleanup effort, but we'll forget to think about how we keep that space clean going forward so that all the work you just did isn't eventually in vain. So a lot of this kind of comes down to data governance and how we manage who has access to the data, who can place things where, etc. I was interviewing a candidate last week, and they were taking me through what they did at their current company. And they were talking about how at their team, any developer has the ability, even if they're not analytics, to create their own explorers, to add their own reports to publish. And I was getting anxiety just hearing them talk about it. I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely not. I can't even begin to talk about how much that just gives me heart palpitations thinking about every developer at Fivetran having access to our explorers, having access to the developer mode and Looker, and being able to build whatever they want and adding it to a public space. No, absolutely not.
Should be able to do whatever they want in their
own private space. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of takes me to the next point. We were thinking about, okay, how do we get to this space where our dashboard instance was such a mess in the first place? And one of the key things we realized quickly, it's like, we let anybody put anything in there. There is no process for review. There's nothing notifying us when something new goes in. That is how so much garbage wound up here in the first place.
No system and no boundaries.
No system and no boundary. So the one thing we did very quickly that anybody can change, just go talk to your Looker admin, is we shut down access. So now only members of the analytics team can add or remove dashboards from a public space. And only members of an analytics team can edit dashboards in a public space.
And
so
I just wanted to add up to what you're saying there, Kelly, because in the traditional enterprise data management space, you have so much process. You have to jump through so many hoops to even do anything because it's so process heavy, versus in our fast growing unicorn world, we have zero process. Anybody can do anything because you can grow really fast, and then you end up having the opposite problem. So there's this fine, power dynamic you have to be aware of, which is introducing things and gatekeepers to slow things down. And you have to really manage people's expectations. Obviously, if you are starting a data team from scratch, or you are in the best position to just add that to your process before you start this whole journey. But if you are kind of jumping in as a senior manager, you have to add that process. You also have to be really sensitive about the change management, because now you're taking away a privilege that people already have.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're very conscientious of.
Yeah, I'd say that's a huge part of it. I think even earlier this week, I had some user reach out to me, upset they couldn't just add what they built into
Is this a
their shared
stakeholder?
folder. Hmm?
Is this a stakeholder or analyst?
Yes,
A
stakeholder.
stakeholder? Okay.
Um,
More. How did you navigate that?
I'm still navigating it. So I think there was one stakeholder department that probably was, and I'm not going to say they were upset, but was probably the most affected because they were a technical team. So our sales engineering team traditionally has done a lot of their builds themselves. They're technical. They clearly know our product. It's their job. They know how to work in a data space. Like otherwise they would not be our technical advocates for our customers and be the ones that are doing the technical component of the sales process, right? So clearly they already know this information. So that's like the first hurdle you have to get over. It's like, okay, sure, I get why you don't want anyone and everyone adding things into a Looker instance, but we know what we're doing. We know how to build reports. We know they're accurate. So we should be able to be an exception. This is an exact conversation I had about 6 months ago. And a lot of that is coming to a compromise, right? And it's a lot of, I hear what you're saying. What you're saying isn't wrong, but at the end of the day, what you're building is not coming through an analytics lens, and it's not going to make the sense to other departments what our ownership in this role is, right? So if there's something wrong on your dashboard, they're still going to think that analytics needs to be the one to fix it. If they have questions about, especially because a lot of the data this team is looking at is very technical and very detailed, and their metrics are incredibly specific. If we're not the ones building it, if there are questions that come up, we're not going to know how to answer them. And it's all about the perspective, right? So coming then with that argument, it's like, well, you just send them to us. Like, we know what to do. We'll tell them what they need to know and answer their questions. And I was just like, no, like, this is not like a middleman. This is not a back and forth. Like, either, we kind of find a solution for y'all that's a compromise between the two, or like we shut off your access. What we wound up doing as a compromise was creating basically a separate space for them to edit and move their own dashboards around that was outside of the shared space. And anything they build is supposed to go through us. Now, earlier this week, I got notified they tried to move some stuff without permission. So that's another thing I have to do to go. I'm having another therapy session with them next week to basically be like, okay, what did we talk about 6 months ago? Let's get to a good. But this is also part of it, right? Like, people are going to have differing opinions. I think just coming at it, trying to see their understanding and perspective while still pushing your own agenda is like, it's such a delicate balance, right? And I could talk about stakeholder management all day long. That's not what we're here to discuss. But I think what helps me have those conversations and know what's happening is setting up these alerts that I talked about earlier. So I have an alert that tells me anytime anything new is added into a public space. And because we have a review and approval process of what's supposed to go in there, in theory, that alert shouldn't tell me anything. It should only tell me things that are getting moved that I was already aware of. But every now and again, people try to move things, it doesn't happen. And then I get alerted saying, hey, this got added. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So clearly someone's putting something somewhere they're not supposed to. So now we have to have, conversations. But a lot of it is just like knowing your data landscape in the first place, right? So you can be, and I went to the stakeholder, I was like, hey, did you guys try to add a bunch of stuff? And first of all, I could tell they were shocked that I knew that. I was like, they were shocked that I was aware. They were like, what?
Data teams monitoring everything.
Yeah, what's going on.
And then, the thing came, I was like, oh, well, people are using these. And I sent them their usage stash. I was like, people are using some of these. They're not using all of these.
Another surprise moment.
Another surprise. So a lot of this is about having those conversations, right? And getting to a core point where you can have a good enough relationship with your stakeholder to basically be like, hey, I know I'm telling you no, but I need you to think that what I'm doing is in your best interest, which it is. Like, it is in your best interest. I know they don't think that, and I'm sure they're very annoyed with me. But at the end of the day, we have to like keep the standards high for everyone, because we have so many employees, and if it's in a space where anyone can see it, it needs to be accurate, and it, especially if it's something that is in a space that is labeled as analytics owned. So this is where we're at. Now, there are some other ways we've gotten around this. One great feature in Looker that's very helpful is using boards. Boards is something we've started utilizing a lot more. And it's probably the compromise I'm going to go with this team to when I speak with them next week. And the reason boards are great is because you can add things in a certain way, you can label them, and you can pull things from any source. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an analytics owned dashboard that's on a board, right?
Can you explain what boards are in Looker and how it's different from folders?
Yeah, so a board is more of just like a landing page, right? So it's really a landing page where you can add links to dashboards that exist. You can add detail about what they are. And also you can add links to outside sources as well. So we've started utilizing them a lot for our sales team specifically, so they can know, okay, if I am an AE in the commercial realm, here is all the information that's important to like the commercial business. And then, so you can have a lot of ways that our boards are organized by hierarchy, starting from, top of the funnel down. So oftentimes sales, you'll look at, here's the executive summaries, here's how the entire business is doing. Then you'll get into the funnel where you look at how the different motions, regions are doing. And then often we'll go a layer lower to show like, okay, if you're an individual contributor or a manager, these are like your day-to-day important dashboards. We do the same with our product team because they have very high level OKRs. Oftentimes they build dashboards, one for each program, and then a dashboard for each like specific OKR they're tracking and the resources that go into the levers. So we try to think about it in a way, in a lens of, if you're looking for a core concept, what is a way that we can easily manage and give you all the dashboards that support that core concept? Yeah, of course. And what's great about boards is it doesn't matter where the dashboard is stored, right? So you can add anything from any source. So it's just clear, okay, if I want to learn more about this business, here's a place where this stakeholder, here's everything they've identified that they think is important to them. And the ability to build boards is something we have left open to everyone at Fivetran. So that is a great compromise you can use so people can still create a custom data experience for their team. Oftentimes we'll help build the bigger ones. It's something that we still assist people with and are what we thought partners. Right now I'm helping rebuild the boards for sales because our sales team did some changes for, how we identified the different business sectors and things. So like people's roles changed slightly. So we're rebuilding boards to be more like aligned with our current like years OKRs and et cetera, just because clearly those change every year. So the information people need to like know what's supporting company and department level OKR changes every year as well. And so that's the compromise we're kind of coming in with. The other thing too that we've kind of done to kind of add to that is, okay, now you have everything on a board. People don't necessarily know the source and people might still assume that it's analytics owned. So how do you, even if it's not, so how do you combat that? And the thing we did was super simple. Anything that is analytics owned has a green check mark emoji in the title.
Right.
That's all it is. And if it doesn't have that, we didn't build it.
There you go.
So that is like such a very simple solution. It doesn't have to, that we just, it's clear, okay, this was built by analytics. If there's a problem, they will fix it. If it's not there, we didn't build it. Go talk to the person who did, because you can tell who did, right?
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. And I'm so glad that you kind of went into talking more about how you fix this problem of data, the dashboard sprawls, and how you guys do data product management today. I don't know if this was already covered when I got disconnected earlier, but can you tell us a little bit more about what the approval process for anything that to have that green check mark at Fivetran?
Yeah, of course. So we have a specific form for it. We use a task management tool in Fivetran called Height, but any task management tool should allow some kind of capability like this. We have our standard like template where anyone can request like kind of standard analytics work of, change this tile, add a filter here, there's a bug in this dashboard.
Oh, so
And
this
then
is
we
like a requesting for changes to an existing dashboard.
Exactly. So we have like a kind of a standard template that's for anything anyone wants. We created a different template that's literally just for adding something into a public space.
Right. Like if I'm an analyst that are working with like a marketing team, I created this new dashboard. Everybody loves it. I want to push now this to like more official analytics approved. What do I do?
You go and you fill out this form. And so the form already has all the pre-required questions that are the lenses that we really think about as to whether or not something should be added and that we already kind of talked about. And the two main lenses we discussed already is like, one, is this like unique and different? And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you want to make sure that your dashboards don't have different versions of the same information that can confuse people. So is what's in here truly unique and different and doesn't exist already in an analytics own space? And two, do we have an audience or is there usage for it already? So that's one thing that like helps make our job easier, is like looking at things like popularity metrics, because if it's in a private user space and we can already tell that people have been touching it and using it on a regular basis, it's like, okay, there's some like clearly people are finding information in here helpful. So that's like the good first lens. Then you have to think about, okay, is this too similar to something that already exists? So we'll kind of review, okay, like what metrics are in here. I use Select Star for this. Like what metrics are in here? Is it too similar to something that's already out there? Is the naming convention too similar to something that's already out there? And oftentimes what happens is sometimes people build better versions of something that already exists and will realize, oh, okay, this is very duplicative of what is already here. So we can bring this in, but then we should deprecate this other asset that is like an older version or a less applicable version to the stakeholder of the information being provided. And that's a lens we come in through a lot. We always try to think like, if we're adding something new, can we deprecate something that's already there? And the only reason that we shouldn't be deprecating is if whatever is coming in is like truly unique and different, right? So examples of that are, you're launching a new team or program. That's probably going to be unique and different. People are building new OKRs for the year. That's different, but it's not unique, right? So if you're building something based on this fiscal year's OKRs, you should be getting rid of whatever exists out there that's for last year's fiscal OKRs, right? Though there are very simple ways to find these kind of information. And these questions are already pre-built into the form I mentioned. So they're required fields. So like information has to be given.
And adding up to that, from an approver and gatekeeper's perspective, I usually first, now that our public space is clean, I go to the share folder to see, are there similar dashboard? Then I use Select Star to see, are there similar dashboard in other shared folder from other department? I may even sometimes search for the key metrics that is the key concept.
The
new dashboard is trying to build in Select Star, and see, are there other dashboards that the analyst hasn't fully scoped or not even be aware of that we should consolidate.
Yeah, I think those are actually really great use cases of column level lineage, between the BI and the data warehouse, or even just within BI, because Looker has so much of that semantic layer, dimensions, and measures that you already have built. And not as many people actually use it to manage their, I guess, like metrics and dashboard that way. I think it's a great like advanced use case of Lineage.
Yeah.
So awesome. We have 5 minutes left, so we probably won't be able to cover a lot more stories here.
We have
But
to have another session. Yeah.
I think that I feel like we need to do a follow-up session. So
Yeah.
maybe tell us a little bit more about where you are now on your product management for data or analytics journey at Fivetran, and where you are going to.
Why don't you start this time, Kelly?
Yeah, of course. So I think one of our big initiatives that we're trying to think through now is, okay, we've gotten our data to like a good clean space and things like have a unique purpose, but how do all these dashboards work together? And that
Amazing.
is right. And that's really the lens we're coming through. So right now, a big initiative I'm working on is really thinking through and clean the majority of our dashboards that are on the lower usage side or are more unique in their focus are coming from our go-to-market and marketing businesses. Just because so many, those roles are so disparate. People are covering very specific regions or targets. And oftentimes the dashboards get pretty niche. So they're going past those first two ideas, right? Like they have an audience, someone needs that information, and they have a unique purpose, right? But then we are kind of getting into, we need to think through philosophy as a company of like how we want to manage data assets and how we want that team to focus. And some of the directive we've kind of gotten is there's been too much focus on how different regions perform. And we want all the different salespeople in each region to kind of think the same way. So if that's the case, we shouldn't have them looking at different information. So now we're starting to work on consolidating a lot of times we'll have the same flavor of dashboard. It's almost the exact same thing, but just like have 4 different versions of it. And so now we're starting to think like really thoughtfully of like, do we need 4 different versions of the same thing for different teams? Or can we put all that in the same space? And the answer is not always cut and dry. A lot of times it's working with stakeholders. It's figuring out like, can you create a dashboard that's not too cumbersome? Are the requirements close enough to where you can consolidate? And that's where we're going next. Now that we're at a place where like everything is clean, everything has purpose, but we still have a lot of data assets to manage as a company. How can we continue to like whittle that down so there's even less question from the user experience of where they need to go to get information?
Yeah. Or even like what's the right metrics to track? Companies have thousands of metrics. And when you really look at all those metrics, what is the real metrics that truly represents what you're looking for? And so sometimes it's called North Star metrics, right? For a lot of companies like KPIs and OKRs. But also like what are the right dimensions and levers that are actually useful that impacts those metrics. In a way, I feel like you don't get to that unless you're already tracking a lot, already using a lot.
Exactly.
And now you are at that place, you'll be able to really see through what are the core and useful metrics to keep on for dashboards.
Yeah, so a project our go-to-market team in analytics just did was we worked very closely with the CEO of the company to define, he wanted to rethink about how we did sales funnel. So we did a lot of work to think, okay, what are the exact metrics that are the most important to the sales funnel? We created 4 dashboards off of those, a lot of work. And then it was, okay, so now we have the suite of like 12 old different funnel dashboards. They don't align with what the CEO has said is important for funnel. Let's deprecate them.
Yeah.
That's something we're working on right now.
Yeah, that's very bold and important exercise to do, for sure.
Yeah.
Veronica,
so
do you want to add something here?
Sure. Yeah. So what Kelly really touched upon goes back to our conversation of the role of being a data product manager. So she touched upon the taxonomy aspect. Everybody speak the same language, and also the standardization that it doesn't make sense to have 50 North Stars. By definition, there's only one North Star for any business, right? What I think about these days is what make the highest purpose of a data product manager or a data team is about driving products that allows you to lever up your revenue, or help you understand the limitation of your revenue, right? The purpose of a data team is not to be everything to everybody and build dashboards. That might be your activity, but at the end of the day, you really need to be a business expert, understand how the business makes money, and do everything you can to make that happen. And a good example I like to share is the fastest promoted analyst in our team. She built a revenue dashboard to help people understand where is Fivetran doing well and where we're not doing well. Are we giving too many discounts to clients? Are we not bringing enough new customers? Or are customers turning off too many tables or features? So that goes back to the system thinking, that you really need to understand the bottleneck of the system in order to build the products. We'll have to have a follow-up session to talk about that.
For sure. Definitely more to come. Thank you so much for joining me today, Veronica and Kelly. I really enjoyed the conversation. So yeah, have a good weekend. And yeah, I can't wait for the next one. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.